They say every soul breaks differently. For Lucia Moretti, it wasn't the thunder of tragedy that shattered her. It was the silence afterward. The silence when the hospital hallway emptied, when the phone stopped ringing, when condolences faded into awkward glances and forgotten texts. Her son, Matteo, had been gone only 6 days, taken not by some grand war or sweeping disease, but by a moment of human failure. A speeding car, a distracted driver, a red light ignored. The world kept spinning, but her own had stopped. She stood in the epicenter of stillness, as if the earth had conspired to leave her behind. But this is not a story about grief alone. This is a story about mercy and how its absence can chill a world already so cold. Before Matteo's death, Lucia was a pillar in her town, a teacher, a mother, a woman of radiant conviction. She believed in fairness, in structure, in doing what was right. She'd grown up in a house that echoed with the words of saints and revolutionaries, but nothing prepared her for the kind of injustice that doesn't come from systems or governments, but from chance and how quickly people hide behind it. The driver, a 19-year-old with a record of reckless behavior, was given community service. Not jail, not even a real trial. It was his first offense, they said. Lucia watched from the courtroom bench as he walked free, flanked by his laughing friends. The judge never once looked her in the eye. That night, she didn't cry. Instead, she opened her late father's Bible, searching for something. A curse, a psalm, anything. The words swam before her, meaningless. Mercy, forgiveness. They felt like betrayals. She wasn't looking to be holy. She wanted justice. And when it didn't come, something inside her curdled. The world didn't need more saints, she thought. It needed reckoning, fire. But it was precisely then, in the ashes of her beliefs, that the whisper of Pope Francis's words would begin to haunt her. A little bit of mercy makes the world less cold and more just. It echoed like a cruel joke. Weeks passed. She withdrew. Church bells that once called her now sounded like mockery. People kept their distance, unsure what to say. Except for Sister Elena, the local nun with hands always warm and eyes that never flinched. One day, she left a note under Lucia's door. Justice without mercy is vengeance in disguise. There was no name on it, but Lucia knew. She burned the note, but the words stayed like smoke in her lungs. Her days became routine, waking up in darkness, drifting through memories, eating only when her body forced her to. But the numbness eventually made room for something sharper. Obsession. She began following the boy, Matteo's killer. She learned his schedule, watched him from a distance. He worked at a local garage now. She stared at him for hours, imagining what she would say, what she might do. Every night she rehearsed confrontations. Every morning she lost the courage, the mercy Pope Francis spoke of. It seemed an impossible luxury. Then came the storm, a literal one, the kind that floods streets and makes the air crack with ancient rage. Lucia was driving, not thinking. Her car skidded near the corner where Matteo died. And there he was, the boy, struggling to help an elderly man out of a flooded intersection. Their eyes met, not for long, but long enough. She drove on, shaking. That night, she didn't sleep, because for the first time, she'd seen something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not arrogance, not defiance. Just a young man in over his head. Still, anger held tight. She visited Father Antonio, the priest who had baptized Matteo. She didn't go for comfort. She went for a fight. Why does the church talk so much about mercy? Do you even know what that word costs? He looked at her, and without hesitation, said, "Yes, it cost God his son." The words fell heavy, but she wouldn't let them in. Not yet. She went home and found herself listening to an old voicemail of Matteo's. He was laughing, asking if she could make lasagna that weekend. Her knees buckled. She wept, not just for her son, but for the version of herself she had lost. The woman who believed in light, in redemption, Was it possible she was becoming the kind of coldness Pope Francis warned about? Another letter came, again unsigned. Mercy is not forgetting. Mercy is remembering without hatred. This time she didn't burn it. She placed it on her fridge. Each morning she read it like scripture, and slowly her thoughts shifted, not toward forgiveness, but toward understanding. She started walking by the garage, not to watch the boy, but to see how her heart reacted. Less venom now, more confusion. Could she ever speak to him? The moment came unexpectedly. He saw her first, and instead of turning away, he walked over. His hands trembled. "I think about him every day," he said. Just that. No excuses. No defense. Just a sentence soaked in guilt. She didn't answer. She just looked at him, long and hard. And then she said, "I know." Something shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the world could be less cold. The bells rang that Sunday, and for the first time in months, Lucia didn't flinch. She hadn't expected the peace to feel so empty. After months of emotional warfare, Lucia Moretti thought that moment, the brief exchange of guilt and acknowledgement, might fill her. Instead, it left a silence even deeper than before. Not the cold void of rage or grief, but something quieter, sadder, like standing in the ruins of a war she didn't remember starting. And yet, somehow, this silence felt honest. She was no longer waiting for an apology that would rewrite the past. She had heard a whisper of truth, and it had asked nothing of her except to listen. But the town hadn't forgotten. Mercy, it seemed, was a scandal. Some whispered she had gone mad. Others accused her of weakness, forgiving a killer. Unthinkable. The same people who had once sent casseroles and flowers now crossed streets to avoid her. And Lucia, for the first time, began to see how rare mercy truly was. Not because people couldn't give it, but because they were terrified of what it demanded: vulnerability, empathy, the courage to live in a world where justice wasn't always clean. It was a different kind of courage than she had ever known. She went back to the church, not on Sunday, but alone on a Tuesday afternoon. The stained glass filtered the light in quiet fragments, like pieces of broken grace. She knelt, not to pray, she still didn't know how, but to listen, to herself, to Matteo, to God, if he was listening. That's when she heard the door creak, open. She turned to see the boy again. No, the young man, standing in the back. He looked more fragile than guilty now, more human than symbol. She didn't speak, neither did he. They simply shared space in a sanctuary neither fully belonged to. Later that evening, she returned home and found a third note on her doorstep. This one wasn't typed or folded. It was handwritten, trembling, imperfect. "If you hate me, I understand, but if you ever want to talk, I'm ready to hear everything." It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. She placed it beside the other letter on the fridge. Something in her softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an openness, like a window cracked after a long winter. That night, she dreamt of Matteo for the first time in weeks, not as a child or a body in a hospital, but laughing at the dinner table. He reached for the bread, knocked over a glass, and smiled his sheepish smile. In the dream, Lucia didn't cry. She laughed. When she awoke, her pillow was soaked, but her chest was lighter. The kind of light that comes not from answers, but from surrendering the need to find them. She sat up, touched the fridge, and whispered aloud, "Maybe this is what mercy feels like." The next morning, she called Sister Eleanor. No pretense, just raw truth. "I don't know what to do with this feeling," she admitted. "It's not forgiveness, but it's not hate either." Eleanor's voice was quiet, steady. "Then maybe it's healing." The word felt foreign, but not impossible. Lucia began to write. Not to the boy, to Matteo. Letters she never intended to send, only to speak what had remained trapped. Rage, love, confusion, guilt. Each word a small exorcism. She didn't ask him to forgive her for surviving. She just told him she missed the lasagna jokes, but the town kept pressing. An article ran in the local paper. Grieving mother opens dialogue with killer. A grotesque oversimplification, but it caught fire. Strangers left anonymous notes, some praising her courage, others condemning her as a traitor to her own son. She learned then that mercy isn't just misunderstood, it's feared because it asks people to challenge their comfort zones. She didn't respond publicly. She didn't owe them anything. This journey was never theirs to interpret. It belonged to her and Matteo, and, in some strange way, to the boy who never meant to kill but did. She finally agreed to meet him in the church garden. No priests, no scripts. Just two broken people trying not to drown. I wish I could undo it, he said. Every day, I want to. She nodded. So do I. He wept. She didn't stop him. It wasn't her job to heal him. But in that moment, she realized. Mercy wasn't a gift she gave him. It was something she gave herself. A chance to step outside the tomb of bitterness. A way to remember Matteo without turning to stone. And it was terrifying and freeing. He visited the cemetery sometimes, quietly, alone. She knew because the flowers changed. Never flashy, always fresh. The first time she saw them, her instinct was anger. But over time, it became something else. Not approval, but recognition. Grief doesn't need to match to be real. And maybe, just maybe, he was mourning too. Not just Matteo, but the part of himself that died with him. That she could understand. That she didn't need to forgive. It simply was. On Matteo's birthday, Lucia lit a candle in her kitchen. No guests, no cake, just one light. And then, without knowing why, she called the boy. She told him she'd made lasagna. She didn't invite him. She just said it aloud. And he cried again, this time not from guilt, but from a grief that finally had room to breathe. Thank you, he whispered. She didn't say anything back, because some mercies speak louder in silence. The bells rang again that Sunday, and this time she walked toward them. Not because she believed everything was fixed, but because she was done hiding. Done letting anger be the only language her pain could speak. She sat in the back pew. The sermon that day was about the prodigal son. She didn't hear every word, but one line cut through. While he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. She wondered if that's how Matteo might see her now, from a distance, full of love. As the church emptied, she stood slowly, her knees aching from the weight of months spent carrying the unbearable. And as she walked out, the world didn't feel warmer, but it didn't feel frozen either. There was air again, breath, possibility. And maybe that was enough. Maybe mercy didn't change the world with fire and thunder. Maybe it whispered through cracked doors and broken voices. Maybe, just maybe, it started with a single choice to stop the cycle of hate. A little bit of mercy, she murmured aloud, makes the world less cold. And for the first time since the accident, she believed it. Not in theory, but in blood and bone, in silence, in memory, in light.